Has this relationship changed over time? If so, how? And I'm going to start with Walter this time.
I do think the relationship has changed. In terms of racism, no longer do we have signs on the door that say for colors only, or blacks or Jews shouldn't apply, women shouldn't apply for positions. But from my research and from other research has shown that there's a new form of social control, and it's the expansion of our prison system. In 1970, there were about 300,000 Americans incarcerated. In 2011, we had 2.5 million Americans incarcerated in prisons, jails, or on probation, parole. So in the context of that, because there is a strong relationship between African Americans, especially African American and Latino males, being incarcerated at extremely dangerous rates, that is a precursor or context for discrimination. Because if you come home from prison with the mark or the X of a felony on your back, it's hard for those individuals to find employment. And there's a very good book that I implore everybody to read. It's by Professor Michelle Alexander. It's called The New Jim Crow. And it really looks at the issue from a perspective that, you know, it's so permeated throughout our institutions. I'm talking about going all the way up to the Supreme Court, where time and time again, the Supreme Court initiates and says that employers, criminal justice authorities, and different agencies can discriminate against minorities. They don't come out explicitly and state it, but it's so entrenched in the policies in the United States that it's hard to even dismantle it on the ground level where I'm working every day. So, yes, African Americans and Latinos and other minorities have made a lot of strides in the last 50 years, but the playing field is still not level. The playing field is still not equitable. I just wanted to share one other point on that. A study that just came out that was conducted by the EEOC on discrimination of workers. What it showed was that people who were unemployed because of the recession showed that white workers were at a 7.9% unemployment peak compared to 16.5% for blacks, the first five syndrome. The research also showed that black women were unemployed 8.5 weeks longer than white males. Also, 7.9% was the unemployment peak for black workers with a bachelor's degree, and that was 2 times higher than their white counterparts. So the research is there. It shows us that strides have been made, but the fight is a totally different fight. It's not overt and explicit. It's more covert and entrenched in policy and practices that many times in corporate America have been grandfathered in the policy that you can't readily see on the surface.
Well, let me just pick up the same theme, because I was thinking along the same lines. Having grown up during a period of legal apartheid in the South, in Jacksonville, Florida, I experienced that version of racial discrimination as a child. And I suppose I had some illusions about it being different when I moved north. My mother was from the north certain illusions, all well-intentioned, I'm sure. But what we see here is a different version of the same thing. Whereas it was the law was if you were white, you went to one school. If you were black, you went to another school in Jacksonville in the 1950s and 60s, including 12 years after the Board of Education. But here it's neighborhood schools. So by having racial segregation of housing, the same thing results, complete segregation for most of the students in the Chicago school system. There was an interesting comment made by a young woman who was working in our research group a few years ago. She was a grad student in School of Public Health and helping Dr. Collins and myself do an analysis of interview data. We had done a study where we were looking specifically at interpersonal racism in that particular study, and we interviewed two groups of African American women, those who had given birth to full-term 7-pound babies, and those who had given birth to premature 3-pound or smaller babies, to see what the differences had been in their experience during pregnancy or in their life in general. And the most powerful difference that came out was their perception, at any rate, of racial discrimination in a variety of different settings. Getting a job, at school, public places, etc. Interestingly, and this was a little bit, I was a little surprised at this myself because more than half of our sample was from Cook County Hospital. Most of the women had been employed during their pregnancy. And one of the strongest of these various questions had to do with racism on the job and finding a job. There was one section where specific discriminatory experiences were queried for these women, and 9 of the 10 in the list were statistically significant in terms of predicting a premature baby. Those were such things as I'm often assumed to work in a lower job category than I do, or things of that type. But the one that didn't come out was people tell racist jokes in my presence. And the young woman who was helping us with the data analysis, I said, isn't that interesting? She happened to be African American. I said, what do you make of that? She said, oh yeah, it's more subtle now. They don't tell the jokes anymore. So yes, I think things have changed over the last generation.
These changes have taken place, and they have taken place in historical periods. During the worst periods of Jim Crow, when you had 2 major wars, World War I and World War II, there was a need for a fully active workforce. And you saw racist unemployment diminish, being transformed into racist job classifications. You had a job, but it was a race-defined job. Certain kind of jobs for the whites and certain kinds for blacks. But the point was you had a job, and you could make a decent living during these wartime situations. This is, like I said, during the period of Jim Crow. Steel mills, meat factories, automobile industries, and things of that nature absorbed as much work as they could straight off the farm, as we used to say, in order to fill in what was called manpower shortages. And by manpower shortages, we put women in there also as well. And many a black woman, for example, from Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas, found themselves on the assembly line learning how to put a car together piece by piece. And during the period of post-war resurgence, called post-war resurgent industrialization, that is, the United States was one of the few countries left outside of the Soviet Union, well, even the Soviet Union suffered greatly, had full industrial capacity and a world market needing to be reindustrialized. During that period, 1945, 1985, race-defined jobs lessened, though were not totally eliminated, but wages were fixed to the cost of living and adjusted accordingly. So even black workers in black jobs could still have a living wage, allowing them to enter the upper levels of the working class, the so-called middle class. And then with affirmative action, formerly jobs for whites only, were now open to all well-prepared black people and other people of color. That was 1965 to 1983. But with the deindustrialization created by finance capital, linked to the intensification of imperialism, 1980 to the present, something we call Reaganomics. That's what it was called. That was that period when they did the shift, Reaganomics. Suddenly, job elimination and downsizing were brought in, and again with a racist character. But this time in a new form, neo-racism. Whereas my brother mentioned over here, where your boss or manager could be a person of color carrying out the policy. And so there have been these changes, but now we're on the down curve of the situation. And those new changes that are about to hit us will definitely create a rage of storm.
Okay, I come from a little bit of a different perspective. As I was going through college and finishing up my degree, I found this company that I currently run and operate and own. And so as far as going into corporate and dealing with things like what Sam was talking about, in my initial jobs, like going through school, I did deal with racism, double whammy, being a female and a Hispanic. And I did not make as much money as my white male counterparts. But it was, at that time, it was like, well, this is not what I'm going to do, so it doesn't really matter. I'm going to school, I'm getting my degree, it's going to be fine. Well, when I started with this company, and over the 10-year period that I've been with them, what I've seen as far as change in people's mindsets, I believe, interviewing them and hiring them to be independent contractors, it went from, my job is going to take care of me, they won't lay me off, that, I'm going to be fine, they're going to take care of me for the rest of my life, to, I don't need anything extra, to where we are today, and sitting down with, the same people from the same industries, saying that, hey, you know what, my mind is open now. I need to look for something that I can control myself, so that I don't have to be in this position again of dealing with sort of, competing for a job or begging for a job, trying to keep my job, worried about is somebody younger going to come in and work the job for half the salary with half the experience, and then I'm out. At this time, I believe that they're looking for a way to make a change, and owning your own business and running your own business is the only way that you can control your future. And I think that a lot of people now are changing to that mindset of, I need to do something different, which is what I believe all of us are trying to come to a conclusion of how do we change this. And I believe that is the way, and that the people's mindsets right now are changing to that, how can I control myself, how can I control my future, and not have it in the hands of somebody else.
Yeah, I believe that it's changed, like George said. I'm sorry. You don't have the blacks only or whites only on the water fountains, but it's been hidden through. And I was very educated today because we said that there's no more quotas or they got away with affirmative action. I wasn't aware of that. And I know that a big portion of me being hired into where I was before was having to do with that. But we got the EEOC, and the policies that just kind of cover over everything. It's kind of like, the people who are losing their houses right now, they didn't read the document. And they know that most people won't read the document to find out what their rights are, so they hide them within those policies. And that's, it's alive and it's well, and whether it's from a organizational standpoint or from an individual standpoint, you still have the racial jokes, you still have the people who just overlook it, and there needs to be awareness about it in order to change it to, because you can't change everybody's behavior, but you can change your individual behavior, which will then impose upon others to maybe move and act in the same